welcome once again to this Business Sustainability Talks. Today we have Sophie, and we'll hear a lot more from Sophie because she's giving a really good presentation in a moment. We make this Business Sustainability Talks, the Umbrella Institute and Shift Eco, because we find that there's a lot of good stories to tell in the UAE and in the Middle East in general about what's happening in sustainability. And we try to give this hour to what's new and what's happening in different industries. What we will be talking about today, you will hear more from Sophie in a moment. If we go on and we talk a little bit about Spinneys and hear what the challenges and opportunities are in your sector.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I imagine that everyone knows what Spinneys is. But in case anyone doesn't, we are a local supermarket chain, been operating for a couple more than 60 years, about 61, 62 years in the UAE. We operate about 85 stores. We also operate the lovely Waitrose stores, if anyone knows those. So we don't produce Waitrose products, but we also help to run those stores in partnership with Waitrose. And sustainability has been a growing area of relevance and interest for the company strategically. So it's lovely to meet you all and share. Yes, I'm looking forward to sharing with you some of the kind of experiences I've had as the sustainability manager on the journey of trying to bring sustainability into the business as a core part of the way that we work. So just a few thoughts from my side. I'm Sophie. I'm the sustainability lead or manager at Spinneys. So my whole job, my only job, is sustainability, which is something that is relatively newish, I think, for local businesses in the region. It's brilliant that companies like Spinneys now, feel the need to have someone full-time working on these really important issues. So without further ado, a couple of slides from me on the journey. So thank you so much, Namrita. So for anyone who's working in a company, I think a really helpful way to think about sort of your journey is this very simple framework from an academic, sustainable kind of CSR academic called Simon Zedek, who came up with the 5 stages of organizational learning. And it really is very simple when you think about it, but it helps to pull these things out because it really depends on who you're talking to inside your company, what you're talking about, as to what level of conversation you're going to need to have when it comes to sustainability. So starting at the very bottom of the spectrum, the very beginning stage for most companies has tended to be, what's that got to do with us? It's not our job. That's the government's job to fix climate change or pollution. Why does that have anything to do with my realm of responsibility? Or it's the customer's choice. They've got choice. They can make that behavior change themselves, whatever it is. The company being defensive and sort of saying that's not within our scope. Why should we invest? And that's obviously a place where I think now most B2C companies cannot afford to be. If you've got a public facing brand, I think it's quite hard to be in that space. But I wouldn't be surprised if many companies who are not, consumer facing, don't have to worry about this sort of brand reputation to the same extent, might still have some of those feelings and thoughts. Moving on up, compliance, the government coming in, bringing in regulation, which makes companies have to kind of hit a new bar. So if you're having a conversation about regulation, it makes your conversation easy, but you're talking about, I suppose, an entry-level response to something. It's what the government minimum requirement is. Everyone has to do that. So we'll do just as much as the government says. That's kind of the compliance level. And then I suppose once you've been complying for years, you get to the point where you're managing those issues that were once kind of change issues that the government brought in. And, this might be something like health and safety. That is a core pillar of sustainability, but it's not really talked about as a sort of exciting, sort of sexy area of sustainability anymore because it's the business stupid. It's just become a part of normal practice, and it would seem very odd if a business wasn't doing health and safety, as an example. And now I think companies are more and more thinking about the strategic side of sustainability, how it differentiates, how we can look better than the other one, or how we can sell a product to have better benefits because it's better quality, it's more sustainable, it's zero, deforestation or whatever it might be. Those topics that give companies competitive edge, and companies thinking strategically about sustainability is something that can grow the brand, grow the value of the company, and actually it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to win more and be better at what you do. And I think this is the space that probably lots of companies now are competing for. Certainly, if you read the news, you'll see lots of companies coming out with, we've done this great thing, and we've done this great thing, and I definitely know how that feels to be in that space. And then at the top of the spectrum, it's really about trying to change the system. I think the civil sustainability is when businesses are trying to rewrite the rules of the game, whether that's lobbying for change in government, talking to their investors about resetting rules, so that they don't have to grow so fast that they can't do things sustainably. And that really is the bit, I think, where for a sustainability manager for the sustainability world, that's where we can really, really change the bar. That's probably the hardest bit to do. And of course, it relies on lots of things being in place, and lots of trust, lots of influence, and other things to make that happen. So I just think that's really helpful, and it helps me think about the different conversations I have inside Spinneys. Who am I talking to? Not everyone is going to think at the civil end, but it helps, because at the end of the day, a lot of this is about influence. So next slide, please. So just what have we been doing? I think there's, oh yes, so if I reflect on our journey and how it's evolved a bit from the past to where it is now, I would say that, for Spinneys, the whole brand has always been about doing things with quality at mind, quality at the core. That is what you're paying for, frankly. When you come into Spinneys, you are paying for more premium products, for those things to have been produced in a way that's more sustainable. We were one of the first in the region to I think we're still the only one actually to fully commit to all of our fresh produce being Global GAP certified, which is a set of assurances that farms have not used pesticides, that farms have not used too much fertilizer, that they're not using too much water, and they're managing their farms well. Coming up with initiatives like the UAE Farmers Club, the Spinneys Farmers Club, which is our way of basically guaranteeing local farms that we will buy their crop ahead of the season, so that they don't end up with a wasted crop, and that often does unfortunately happen. So supermarkets will always be bargaining for the best prices. We're not always like that, because we want quality first, but we don't want to leave those local farms in the lurch and not make their money at the end of the season. So that's why the Farmers Club came about. So that's the history part. And as you can see, Spinneys has always wanted to grow itself into this niche of being about quality, having that point of difference as a brand, and compliance as well. Of course, being compliant with regulations has been a really key driver for us as well, particularly on areas like food safety, and all the areas that are important to the government. The shift, I think, now is that we are probably focusing on embedding these things as more inherently sustainable goals and targets in themselves. So how did those initiatives come about in the past? They came about through very passionate and individuals really who wanted to take on the mantle of doing something and making something change within their scope. And it's all been brilliant. It's come from leadership, it's come from very motivated and passionate individuals. And the thing that we're now trying to do is actually say, well, we want to bake those things in to the business. So whoever it is who works at Spinneys has to do these things, and that these goals and targets live on and have longer term, a lifespan. So we have a strategic plan that we're building at the moment. I just showed the guys in the room. It's got like 140, at least, many rows of actions for us as a business. And we're bringing our whole sustainability commitment into clear pillars with clear targets, roadmaps and KPIs, so that every year from now, we will start reporting on our progress to achieving those goals. One of the key things that helps kind of frame a lot of that was that leadership really believe in the idea of purpose as a business, which I think is great. So they're really genuinely, Spinneys believes in the idea that we're here to put value back into the system. So it's purpose, not just profit, which I think is really, really crucial. So we have a purpose statement as a business, which is to nourish and inspire our communities to live better lives day by day, which taps so much into, you know, the ideas of sustainability and creates that mission statement for us all inside the company, beneath which sits all of the kind of specific sustainability actions, KPIs, and reporting processes as well. So that's the journey we're on now. It's more formalized, becoming methodological, becoming measured. Very important. We can't manage what we can't measure, and much more mix of kind of managed and strategic for all of the topics that we need to touch on. From health to well-being, to sourcing, to waste, to emissions, to people, and how we govern it ourselves as well. Thank you, Maestro. So I was just going to share a few examples of things we've been doing in the past kind of few years to kind of hopefully inspire you and give you a sense of what's been happening on the ground. We launched a sustainable store a couple of years ago, which we still use now as a concept store to trial new initiatives. So there's new refill things going into store in the next few months with different brand partners. But there we try to create sustainable touch points around the whole shop. So whether that's aiming to have, you know, healthy checkouts, so we're not putting sweeties and unhealthy things at the exit of the shop where you can just grab a chocolate bar, to all the refill initiatives that we've got all around the store. So you can actually refill in every category now, from your water bottle, we have free water, to bringing your own container to any of our delis and counters and getting a dirham off your bill. So lots of these things we've been trialing and testing to see how they work, and they're going to be rolled out as part of that plan that I kind of showed you the helicopter view of, the one-page view of. So they're looking to be rolled out, which is great. Farm to Table is our mission to educate 1 million on healthy and sustainable diets. And that is a wonderful program where we are creating content on healthy eating and living. So diet, lifestyle, drinking, exercise, responsible consumption, recycling, all the key topics you think of when it comes to food and sustainability. And we're creating modules for schools so that if they have that gap in their curriculum, we give them the tools they need to teach the children those lessons. So far we have around 68 schools signed up in that program, which is wonderful. And we've run regular events as well. So this is one of the events with the kids' hands up in the air, is a cooking event we ran with a wonderful local chef who tried to get the kids excited about eating vegetables, because we know that's one of the biggest challenges that parents have. So that's Farm to Table. And then on recycling and plastics, which is everyone's kind of pet peeve, we're really focusing on this idea of circular economy, which is what the UAE is focusing on, and is the kind of global consensus on how we manage resource and how we manage waste efficiently, to keep materials in a closed loop. So we're focusing on collecting with local collectors, of course, but also trying to recycle locally where we can, and putting materials back into new products. So in the trial that we ran in a partnership with PepsiCo and Degrade, a local recycler, we actually created out of that locally made, well, in fact, locally recycled polyester yarn, which went into a blend into the colleagues' t-shirts in that store. Obviously, in the ideal world, we want those bottles to go round and round in a closed loop, but regulation meant at the time we couldn't do that. So we wanted to build trust in the recycling system. So there's just 3 examples that I could talk about all day long, but I'm trying to keep it as short as possible. So some success stories. And I guess, where are we on that sort of evolution scale? I think that what's great is that with our sustainability plan, we're moving, you know, in the direction of ESG. Our first report will not be an official ESG report, because we don't sort of need to do that just yet, but we're laying all the foundations in place for that. So all the topics and issues will be covered in that report. And that's really coming into business practice. So now people don't go, what is this ESG thing? What is this sustainability thing? People don't do that anymore. It's becoming part of business practice. So I would say that's seen as a kind of managerial, it's the business, stupid, you know, it's what we do. We still, though, need to keep our eye on very much on the ball, because our customers, and even just in the conversation I've had this morning with the guys, you know, we have very engaged, very educated, very, very educated customer base who spend a lot of time looking around, reading and understanding what's going on in the world, and they want to do the right thing, and they want us to be giving them the choices that they want to make, and they want us to be doing the right thing. So that need for transparency through the reporting, I really hope will be a great step forward. And then our leadership team really do, I mean, things that I think in all of the sustainability areas, we're doing things that are quite transformative in the region. So whether it's the Farmers Club, our business incubator program, there is a genuine desire to try and put something back into the local system here. And I also hope that with the publishing of our report and our CEO statement and all those things that come out, there will be a kind of call to action for local businesses like us to also step up and start, you know, getting our data in order, start doing our carbon reporting, start being transparent about the progress we're making. So I think even the step of, you know, committing to public reporting when there's no mandate from the government to do it yet is taking, actually, for now, I would argue, but I welcome your thoughts, a bold move. So that's where we are, I would say. And a few final thoughts from me on, if anyone is working in a business or if anyone's trying to agitate for change, it's so obvious really, but it's about all these different things. It's about influencing. It is a people game. You need to think about where everyone is on that scale. Are they going to be defensive? Are they going to be excited? Are they going to see it as an opportunity? And how do you tap into what they want? How do you make it a win-win for you and the world and Mother Earth and them? And they might not be thinking about Mother Earth like you are, but that's okay. You can find other things that will, you know, that you can win on together. Create your own stories and evidence. I think the more you get your own momentum and your own good stories, the more momentum, you create to do more. People tend to be more excited by things that have happened in their own company than than you coming in and going, well, look at what this company did. So I think building your own stories to create momentum is really, really helpful in the journey. Building trust and investing in sustainability. So I think what the point of this one is that you need to create your sustainability community, and it is all about kind of creating trusted relationships and safe environments and spaces where you can actually do some of these things together. So when I say two is more than two, I mean the idea of if you you put more than one person in a room, it's like bringing more than what one person could do times two. It's like one person times four or whatever. Basically, two is greater than two. So you do need the power of people and networks, and you need to have trust in order to take some of the kind of what people perceive as risks. You know, maybe you don't perceive some of these things to be a risk, but others do. So partnerships, collaborations come through creating that trust. It's really valuable. It goes a long way. Go with the grain and agitate. So you do need to go with whatever the grain of your business plan is. You kind of, if you're going to come in and be an activist all the way along, no one's going to want you to get on the train. You have to, be business aligned, is what I'm learning day by day. And but that doesn't mean you can't agitate along the way. So I think it's about working out how you make the sustainability agenda kind of fit with the business plan and where you really need to do that agitation, but probably pick your battles and find the balance there. Otherwise, no one's going to want to work with you on these things which are challenging topics. It's all about change. It's painful for people. How will you sustain you? I mean, that's probably the most important one, really. So So yeah, just think about that. How do you sustain you? How do you sort of step back when you need to have a bit of a break and recover? How do you nourish yourself and do things outside of your job, and don't kind of go mentally round the bend? And I think probably just getting out with nature for me is one of the ways I do that, and doing things that are very body centric. So whether it's just running, dancing, moving, that takes me out of my head and gives me a break. And also meeting with my sustainability friends, of course. So that's just some thoughts from me. And then the final quote, I've just pulled up a fantastic article. If anyone is in the sustainability corporate space, this is an article I thoroughly recommend reading. Because it really does, it's quite a horrible article to read. In fact, it's a bit painful, but it's about how, what we really should be trying to do as sustainability people is drive systemic change, because that's the only way we're going to break out of this inherently unsustainable system. So we are at risk, with the CSR, the corporate sustainability movement, the reporting movement, we are at risk of just sort of, playing within a very narrow field that just, bends our businesses to the fossil fuel industry. And so this is quite out there, this is quite radical, but what the article says is, use the role you have to kind of try and be on that civil space in the spectrum on ZX, 5 stages, work with people in other companies, lobby for change, talk to the government. It's about changing the system. So the more you can do to try and create new models of doing things, new partnerships, be present at the policy discussions, that's really where the system can be changed as well. So that was just something that's been in my mind recently, but I welcome people's thoughts on that as well. So thank you. That's excellent. Hand back to Anne-Marie.
There's a lot of different levels that people can hear from different aspects, right? So I think your 5-step chart, it really also shows that, like, with every step, there's more education, more awareness, like opening different boxes and figuring out just how deep it is, right?
Yeah.
So you have had a similar title for the last around 5 years, 4 or 5 years?
I'd say 3.
Yeah. How do you think you have shifted as well with the business, and is it pulling you, or are you pulling it?
I think it's a constant tension, to be honest. I think that, I don't know if anyone else is working in kind of businesses, but I think you always feel like you're sort of a little bit of a mole going inside. I really love the company. I actually, I love what we do. I love, production, I love nature. So I love going out to see farms, and I love food. So I do love what we do, and I love the company's sort of ethos and spirit, and it's brilliant. But yeah, there's always going to be that bit of me, like I said in the last slide, that wants to sort of help to change the system. So I think it is that healthy tension, and in a way that's probably partly the purpose of this role, is sometimes to make people feel a little bit uncomfortable, because if we weren't making people feel a bit uncomfortable, we wouldn't be questioning things and we wouldn't be trying to change. But I mean, that said, the trust thing is so important. I think you can have those conversations when you've got really trusted relationships. So for me, the capital of this job is in the trust, it's in the relationships. It enables so much else to happen. So I think maybe the way I've changed is I've become a little bit, well, I'm still impatient, but I've become more comfortable with the fact that things are going to take time to change. You have to kind of just not kill yourself, that you've got to sustain yourself. I think it's one of the things I've probably learned the most. We can't be like the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once. It's just not going to work that way, otherwise the business would just crash. So yeah, just allowing it to take a little bit of time, but keeping that healthy tension.
Yeah, so I think that feeds into, like, how do you set good KPIs for your own job and for the colleagues around you? How do you make sure that the KPIs are relevant? And
exactly. So that's one of the things in our plan, is that everyone, who's responsible for one of those kind of actions in that plan will have their own KPI, and they'll have to report on that every year. So exactly, the responsibility becomes diffused out into the organization, which is the way it should be. That's embedding sustainability, right?
And have you found at any point in any time that some of your colleagues say, no, sustainability, we just don't want to do it? Or do they all have just different?
Everyone knows. Well, I think basically the people who probably have been exposed to it in previous jobs kind of go, well, obviously we have to do this. It's a no-brainer. I think maybe the only gap we might have in some areas is an understanding or a learning gap. But I don't think anyone is like saying no. No one is saying no. Everyone is saying yes, but how and why and what? You know, it's actually more about scoping it and putting some boundaries around all those topics we could work on, setting the KPI, setting the action, so that people can just go and do it. Retailers are very action oriented, so people just want to have a task to go and do. Most of the time.
And a task is good, right? Because then you have something, you can see that there's progress, you can see something is happening, you're doing something together that you might not have been able to do without each other. 100%. What about when you have young people joining the company? Are they as impatient as you, or like do they bring in other? No, they do. I think everyone. I mean, the thing that's nice about Spinneys, not to go on a Spinneys sort of PR thing, but is that you do have a lot of kind of responsibility and freedom in your space to do, so yeah, people do that. And almost everyone who in all the departments now, regardless of the sustainability plan, they've got something on their plan which is about sustainability. People want, that's the sort of value you can add beyond your numbers and performing well and making good sales. That's great, but what are you doing to kind of grow value and evolve your category? People are excited by it. I think it's innovation, and it ticks so many other boxes. So yeah, and we're also, every time someone joins the company, there's a new joiner's induction on sustainability now. So that's something new that we have. So for everyone at every level, wherever you're joining into, whether you're on the shop, in factory, wherever, you will have a kind of quick introduction, which is nice. Yeah. Excellent. And very nice strategy you showed as well, like a very mix of practical, how you live your life good and safe and well-being, and then how do you take this up to a more governance sort of, how do you see this sort of strategy enabling change, both internally and externally?
Well, the thing about the strategy is that it's been built with all the stakeholders from the bottom up. So everyone knows that it's their action. So the good thing is that this isn't sort of me sitting down in a dark room kind of writing it down. It's really been done with pure stakeholder engagement. And so I think that kind of shaping of the content, the shaping of the plans is been coming through from the people itself. And like with most companies, if you have a target you have to meet, when it comes to publicly reporting on that progress to that target, you don't want to look bad in a year or 2 years time. So the idea is that those targets really help us to stay focused on achieving the goals, delivering our share of responsibility as a company. So that makes sense.
Yeah, I think definitely.
But along with that, we need to keep people motivated. So
but is it also an open? Does it feel like it's a partnership between you and your suppliers? Did you say we want things to change? We need emissions to go down. We need plastics to leave the system.
Yeah. So the supplier sort of engagement piece and working with suppliers is something that is very, very big. We have tens of thousands of products at Spinneys and many, many suppliers. So that in itself is a part of our plan. Yeah. But how we go about engaging them is probably going to be, once we've got our own house in order, everything that we own, so what we call scope 1 and 2, that plan is in place. In the plan, we need to go and talk to suppliers, but that will be sort of very soon, but that will be like the next phase. And it will be about engaging with them and listening to them. Lots of our suppliers are global leaders on sustainability. PepsiCo, Unilever, Nestle, really doing big things. And I've already got quite mature processes in their supply chains for managing things like agricultural practices, looking out for big issues like deforestation, human rights issues. So we're probably going to be learning a bit from them as well, I would imagine, along the way. And a lot of it will be about just more information sharing between us and our suppliers. We obviously do ask them for a lot of information now, but it's perhaps the scope of that is going to be much more opened up as the future goes.
So we also live in this very interesting place where we come from so many different nationalities, so many different places. We want our food from here, our things from back home. Like customers are very, very demanding in this place. How do you see customers learning over time that this will change with emissions being looked at?
Well, I think one of there's probably two answers to that, which are very different. I think one of the answers is, I'm not sure people are going to care about a lot of the stuff we change or do, quite frankly, and that's fine. Even if sometimes we move products in and out sometimes anyway, depending on where the demand's going. So, you know, I think we as a business know that we just need to make decisions that are the right ones to do, not sacrificing the business, not sacrificing the consumer, but that's the kind of the harder answer. And then the sort of the softer answer is, you know, we do have a responsibility to educate, and we know that we do. And that's one of our commitments in our report that we will share, you know, in the next kind of 2-3 months when it's finished. That we actually have a responsibility to engage our consumers in a dialogue around sustainability, to be more transparent about products and things like, you know, emissions. The big nut that all the retailers and manufacturers are cracking at the moment in Europe is around the scope 3 emissions, because it's where most of our emissions are embedded, is actually in our supply chain. It'll probably be like 95%.
And it's a lot of things that people don't understand, right? That emissions is something when it's not just transportation. We talk a lot about transportation, turning on and on lights, using less water, but it's actually in the production and the extraction and just this, like manufacturing products in different packaging and boxes.
Totally.
And we take it very much for granted, don't we? So, and it's really hard to see if it's the glass that's the emissions, or if it's the water inside the glass that's the emissions.
I know.
And where it comes from.
Well, I mean, I always say that we really focus on packaging, but usually your product has got 10 times the emissions of the packaging it was put in. So, you know, but that's the place where we will get to, is eventually with all the products that we sell, there'll be big exercises and working in partnership with suppliers to get the data on the products and all this. So a lot of the next phase of what we'll be doing as a business is getting our data in order and starting to measure, because obviously with that measurement will come other decisions and other so help keep moving things along.
So how about inside your company? You've now for the last few years really been doing this, like working mostly on your own. How do you make sure that everybody has the same understanding of what sustainability is inside your company? Just if we close it off on that, how do you make sure that when new people come, they get the same understanding, when people in different departments have the same understanding? Like, it's a big task in itself, isn't it?
It's huge. So again, a kind of commitment on training is that sustainability will be a core part of the training that we deliver. So, you know, to date, we haven't had, you know, annual, I don't know, sustainability training for every colleague, let's say. But going forward, there will be something for everybody, depending on what your role is, whether it's, you know, learning about the importance of recycling in stores and reducing the use of, you know, towels, water, and so on, or about actually helping the stores learn about where products are coming from, so that they really know how valuable, as Anne-Marie was saying, how valuable a single piece of produce is in terms of what it's used to get it there. And then the kind of at the more strategic end, the guys who are shaping their categories and working with suppliers might be around how to, you know, work with suppliers to tackle sustainability challenges. So there's lots of things we can potentially work on, but the commitment for now is that we will be making that training program. We've actually got a very passionate, engaged training manager who's already like knocking at the door on that, so it's great. And we've already actually begun doing inductions for new joiners, as I mentioned. So anyone who joins the business learns about kind of the key things that we're looking at. They get some sort of tips and things that are relevant to their role. on how they can get started.
Yeah.
But it's constant. I mean, I think it needs, continual communication, it needs continual reminding, like I say, creating the stories that create momentum and inspire people, so that whatever they're working on, they can be inspired to help themselves move further in the targets they've got. And I think it needs to become cultural. And I think the great thing is our CEO wants that to happen. So that's what he says to me. Oh, it's like, how do we get this into the culture? It's like, great, I love that you're asking that. I don't have the answer right now, but we'll get there.
Time as well, right? But when you are a retailer, you have there's so many international frameworks pushing into the company, going out of the company. How do you make sure that everybody's educated around international frameworks, something simple like the Sustainable Development Goals, but also bigger, something like maybe human labor rights and that sort of thing?
I mean, I think in a way, I feel as though my job is to really simplify sustainability for people whose lives are already really, really busy and who've got their own what we'd call business as usual targets. My job is to get sustainability into business as usual. So I've got to make it as simple and aligned with the language that those teams speak as possible. And one of the things I've been kind of learning is that probably I need to start with the language of the business, because the more frameworks that, I can take frameworks and I can turn them into things that make sense. But I think the more people are expected to learn, memorize, remember, and dig into, the more overwhelming and confusing it honestly gets. So in a way, my job is to help take all of that information and turn it into something that is really clear and simple and actionable for everybody, so that people don't get overwhelmed, because otherwise the space, it's huge. I mean, we're reporting using GRI reporting standards, which are, for corporates, is pretty established framework. But I'm, not expecting everyone in our business to know. It's just impossible, because they would have to be working in that space for decades.
Different, like for wood or for paper or for plastic, for food and fish, and there's something for all of them, right? Exactly.
And all of those actions would be pulled out for all the relevant individuals, but I wouldn't expect them all to be going and sitting through the frameworks and it's just not needed.
So there's no test on MSC or
we would be if we would be going to be, or we already are, purchasing MSC certified fish. That's something that takes place in our supply chain, and whatever the buyers need to have in terms of certifications and assurances to make sure that those things have been done. Of course, they need to know all the technical checks, and that's for the technical team and the compliance team as well. But we've got to kind of bound it for people. Otherwise, sustainability becomes this massive academic exercise for everyone, and no one's going to do it. No one's going to want to do it. So we do have to keep it very.
Do you ever feel like you're this book or dictionary that people come and say, do you know this latest three-letter acronym? And then you're like, you have to.
Yes, and I often don't know. I just say, go to Google.
Yeah. It's complicated, isn't it? Because for every sector there's a specific.
There is. I mean, sometimes, for example, if it's something like a particular fish type, we might be looking at bringing in, and the guys will say, is that sustainable? So I might point them in the direction and say, well, let's look at the fisheries management website for that particular ocean, and we go and look up the fish species, and we look to see, is it red, amber, green, and we do a bit of research. So some of it's about helping with that process as well, but pointing them in the right direction. I mean, I think this is the challenge, is that it can get so big very quickly, and I think you want to make it something that people want to do, not something that is and it's got to be process, part of business as usual process, not and that's again the reason for having this plan, is that that's how we're doing that. We're putting all those processes into place.
Do you think that sustainability is trying to make the world less complex, maybe even less globalized, with a lot of this local look that we're seeing?
I know what you mean. I think sustainability is trying to maybe address some of the challenges in the globalized, let's just call it food system. But I think that at the same time, I don't think we're going to solve sustainability by only going local. I think local is one way that businesses are making sure that they invest in their local economies. I think that's really important. And I think, of course, food miles and things are a really crucial way we reduce emissions. But at the same time, that's another one of those ones where when you open the box and you go, hang on, but I thought growing tomatoes in the UAE would be more sustainable. I think it actually is, by the way, don't worry. But I also know that growing tomatoes in the UK versus Spain doesn't always mean your life cycle analysis is better for the UK tomatoes.
And this is that assumption about, for instance, transportation or water, how much it really takes up in the emissions, right? It's really complex system to figure out.
And we've been like trading globally for so many years. I think, you know, it's not like kind of global trade is a particularly new thing, but it's probably just the volume of trade that's happening. And the number of people, and you know, we have to be more efficient with what we've got. And of course,
what about like seasonality and that sort of thing? Like when we were young, we couldn't have oranges all year round, right? So, but now we can have them from 10 different countries. Is that something that is also being looked at? If it makes sense to have something all the time?
So we don't always. I mean, like someone asked at the beginning, Priyanka was asking about the berries, and lots of the farm, some of the farms are thinking about trying to do kind of year-round production of things like berries in UAE, but we've only offered the local berries when they've been in season states. But yeah, it's a challenge. I think retailers have to be extremely bold to say we're not going to offer blueberries. I mean, being honest, I'm not up to speed with that debate on seasonality, but I've also not really seen. I don't think I've seen any retailers make commitments on this. We've done a big, extensive peer review of all the retailers with the best sustainability strategies in the world in order to define our strategy, and no one really talks about eliminating categories because of seasons, unfortunately. Whether you think that's the right thing or not. Yeah, but I think it could be looking at, you know, getting your balance right, or even being more efficient with how you ship things. Our planning team are obsessive about not leaving any space in a container, so they will fill every single, and even to the extent where sometimes they're coming up with new solutions to fill a container using a different kind of stacking method or things that no one thought about before, because we don't want to waste any space. So you know, they're doing it to be efficient, save money, but actually they're very motivated by saving emissions as well. They're a very, very passionate team. So anyway,
so
I think
shall we go ahead to some questions? We have you know, everyone attending asking a few questions, so I'm going to chime in with a few questions they're asking. So we have Priyanka here who's talking about an internal rating at some point, so rating products that are being distributed to customers so that customers have a benchmark and they can choose better. Is Spinneys planning something like that?
We're planning something like that for health and well-being. Yeah. So for products in our own range, which have a better nutritional score, there will be something coming. Yeah. I think on then the other things, carbon emissions, embedded footprints, that's really interesting as well. And I think it's definitely been talked about. It will just maybe be something that comes kind of, we have to prioritize it, but it's definitely something that we've been talking about. So I don't think it's off the table.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just a follow-up question from my side for that. Is there a way of vetting suppliers? So before anyone selling at Spinneys, is there a way that you're checking how suppliers are and, you know?
Oh, yeah, 100%. So we've got quite a rigorous supply vetting process. Yes. And that largely will focus on lots of different things, but one of the big things for customers to know is it will focus on food safety as a very core factor. What of course we want to do is broaden that out to include lots of other things, like, you know, you're not deforesting, tick, or, you know, how you're looking after the people in your supply chain. But I think I mentioned it in the presentation, for all the fresh produce we buy, we only buy it from farms who are accredited Global GAP, and Global GAP is a kind of umbrella assurance scheme that looks at, it basically audits farms to make sure that they're managing their farms efficiently, they're not using pesticides, well, maybe tiny amounts, but only as and when needed. They're not throwing on chemicals basically onto their fields, and that they're also looking after their employees well. So that is a base level for us on produce. And then there are other things that we look at as well. But we're going to probably expand that, as I said, to look at other sustainability topics as well.
Got it. We have a question from Sunil. He asks about Spinneys initiatives for the sustainability of stores, vehicles, offices. So basically the internal systems.
Yeah, so thank you. That's a great question, because that's a really cool part of the plan, in a way that we can control it. We own a lot of our buildings. We own warehouses and factories, so and our trucks as well. So there is a really nice, like, ownable opportunity to manage scope 1 and 2 emissions, and that is all in our plan. So efficient buildings and sustainable buildings management is one of the key areas that we're looking at in our plan. Renewables roadmap, so how we bring in more renewable energy. Obviously there's only so much we can do in UAE with kind of DWAR and you know, Abu Dhabi energy and everything, but what we want to do is have more of the conversations with, you know, with DWAR about how could we get more renewable energy and usage per site and things like that. So it's constantly being thought about. The plan is to now embed that into processes in a much more rigorous way. But yes, I hope that answers your question. And things like all the trucks and logistics and things, you know, that will be part of a kind of fleet transition plan and things like that as well.
Okay, we have a question from Rishabh, and he asks about examples of success factors for any CSR initiative.
Well, I guess it would depend on the initiative. So for each of the areas in our plan, there will be KPIs, so sustainability or strategic KPIs. So if it comes to something like, let's just take packaging that everyone loves, one of our KPIs is going to be the percentage of new materials reduced of total materials used in our packaging. So we're wanting to use recycled or renewable content in our packaging. And so we'll look at the percentage of the total tonnage of packaging that we use for that. So each of the metrics of success will be different depending on what we're talking about. I guess overall sustainability success would be, I suppose you could kind of look at each of the pillars and what are the pillars in our plan, which contain the different relevant topics. And you could say, you know, on a heat map, how well are we doing? And, you know, but you need to sort of measure each thing based on whatever you're, you know, trying to achieve with that thing. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, fair enough. I know you've already answered this question, Sophie, but if you want to add anything more, Christina asks about how you engage your customers to embrace your sustainability efforts so that these efforts are not wasted.
Thank you. Oh, that's a nice question. I know what you mean. We need to do more things like this. So we, I mean, actually the store that I mentioned at the beginning was that store in Layan. And in that store, what we tried to do is do loads of communication that we wouldn't ordinarily do. And we actually did put the SDGs. I love them. We put the Sustainable Development Goals in. Maybe not everyone knows what they are, so it was a bit of a try, but we were definitely communicating very heavily in that store about whether it was the water refill, all the different refill stations, what we, you know, how we're producing even things like, you know, beef, which I know everyone loves to hate beef because of the climate, but how we're producing that in a way that is okay and is sustainable, locally sourcing fish videos we're playing in reels in the store and things like that. But I think there's a lot more we can do. I mean, our Spinneys magazine usually will feature a Meet the Producers, which is sort of about just reconnecting people to how their food's been produced. And all of our producers, as I said, particularly for produce and fresh, have got very, very good sustainability credentials. They've got great stories. So yeah, but there's so much more we can do, and I think it's again, it's in our commitments to make that a kind of ongoing campaign piece, which it kind of already is, but I think it could be dialed up even more. So thank you. Sorry for a rambling answer.
No. So we have a question from Jyotika, which where she asks about how do you engage with businesses, startups within the sustainability space in line with your strategy, or companies that have a concept sustainability store? I wonder if Jyotika talking about Shifty Go.
So is that how do we engage sort of small businesses, do you think? Is that?
I think that would be it. How do you engage small business? Yeah.
Well, one of the things that we do, which I think is amazing, was set up in 2021, is the Small Business Incubator Program. So if anyone wants to kind of grow their baby, they've got a great concept or a product and they want to get listed in retail, that's your Dragon's Den, effectively, or Shark Tank, whatever it's called, your way of pitching the product to senior Spinneys buyers, and they'll check it out. And it's like an open, you have to sort of apply to get into that Dragon's Den, but it's amazing. So I think that's one brilliant thing we do. We also, you know, we don't just feature things in the magazine or on social that we sell. Obviously we do primarily because it's got to try and drive a return. But I think what I like about Spinneys is that we also talk about local businesses we think are amazing. So we don't currently work with like the Waste Lab as an example of one, but we did do a piece covering them in a magazine a few months ago because we just think what they do is amazing. So yeah, we are small and local, and that's kind of what we're like. And I think anyone can kind of approach Spinneys and you know, see if there's something in it for both of us. So yeah, I hope that kind of answers.
Oh, but I think like I've written down here that it's a very ecosystem feeling in Spinneys, right? That you're building like this community of different companies with a different, like the similar mindset.
Yeah.
So that you have the same goal for one piece.
100%. So I mean, we have a partnership with Lime Tree Cafe as an example. We sell their amazing cookies at different times of the year, and we do events. We have done events with them. So there's, yeah, I think we have that kind of Whole Foodsy small scale vibe.
Whole Foods, sorry.
Yeah, you know,
mentioned a competitor.
That's fine. I don't think they're here.
We have an interesting question from Kokila, where the question is, how does Spinneys balance competing demands between sustainability goals and financial performance? And what strategies do we use to prioritize sustainability initiatives?
So I wish we could be having this conversation in a year's time, because I think we'll do it again. I'll probably have more and more examples for you, because I mean, I honestly, if the business thinks it's the right thing to do, they will invest. I think the thing that's different now is that we will have this plan to kind of drive through and be a kind of baseline for those conversations. Say, look, we've got a target, we've got a commitment. It takes the discussion about whether you need to do something off the table, and it just becomes about how you do it. And what are the best options for how you get there. So I think those conversations, I'll let you know, I'll keep you posted. But it hasn't actually been, I haven't experienced too much of a blocker yet with that, to be honest, which does tell you the company really does get behind it. And what was the second part, sorry? We were saying at the start before we went online that I think when companies have got their own internal targets and commitments and goals, it stops being a question of whether we should do something, but how we do it and how we prioritize it. So partly the goals we'll set out will inherently have some timelines which kind of prioritize things, or they represent just how much time it will take to get there. So the net zero target, for example, which we'll match with UAE. But yeah, so anyway, the plan will help. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll help. So we're now talking a little bit about diversity and inclusion. So the question is about how do you have annual KPIs in regard to diversity and inclusion that's shared with HR? Are there regular reviews? How is the entire organization building a strategy around diversity and inclusion?
Yes, that is indeed a core part of our sustainability work and HR. So I think our first commitment report, which is going to come out, is going to be one which will tell you about what we're aiming to achieve in our vision and mission as a company. And that's kind of the goal, is to say, and it's not just for internally, but it's for everyone to see what is Spinneys going to do? You know, what is this local company that has a big footprint going to actually be doing about all these issues that matter to everyone? So that's the first thing. Diversity inclusion will be in there, and we'll be making our commitments in there. And then the following year, we'll be kind of disclosing on the actual metrics and numbers with everything else, because we're just trying to kind of get the commitments on paper, and then the following year is going to be about all of the data kind of beginning to come in and report on the numbers. So yes, but it is a core part, and I won't share it right now because it's in draft, if that's all right with you.
Fair enough.
So yeah.
We have the last question. It's amazing how many questions we've got, and we're running short of time. So this is the last question, unfortunately. But it's a very interesting one. So as a business, how can you transition from corporate social responsibility to corporate social impact, which is more efficient as a sustainable practice for the long term?
I think I understand that. So it's like, actually, how do we go from it just being exactly kind of team bonding? And well, again, I think it is in the measuring of what you do. So the enormous job of, you know, sustainability now is to actually start measuring impact, and that's kind of, again, what we're now shifting to at Spinneys. So we used to be, you know, we've got great initiatives, we feel these are the right thing to do, our customers like them. Maybe they were kind of not one-offs, but, you know, there were things that were happening that were great, but organically coming up. Now it is, no, these are the topics we have to work on as a business, because this is what we're responsible for. This is material to us. Here's what we're going to do over time: reduce our emissions by X% over this time. Again, it will be in the report when it comes out. And the measure of success is this. And every year we'll be giving you an update on how far along we are to reaching that progress. So we're moving from just talking about stuff to measuring, and therefore measuring impact.
No, I think that's a fair point. Measuring impact of every activity is really important. So we're short. We're out of time. Thank you so much, Sophie, for this amazing session. I think just the amount of questions that and the engagement of the group shows how much we all truly enjoyed the session and all of your input. So thank you for taking the time and for having us here at the lovely Spinneys headquarters. We really appreciate it. For everyone that attended, thank you so much for being here. We really enjoy all your questions and all your engagement. As you know, the Umbrella Institute and Shift Eco continue with different events on a monthly basis. So next month we will have more events. Continue to follow us on LinkedIn, and we look forward to seeing you at our next events.
Thank you so much. Bye. Thank you.